What was a strange experience you had as a child that you didn't know was incredibly disturbing until you were older? I was playing at a friend's house in grade school. I went looking for the bathroom, but opened the door to the laundry room instead. My friend's mom was sitting on top of the dryer and completely freaked out when she saw me. It didn't occur to me until about 20 years later that she was probably masturbating. I had a childhood friend for about a year or so who lived just down the street from me. He was a pretty normal kid from what I can recall. I remember him getting really excited one day about an upcoming visit from his uncle. He told me about a game that he and his uncle would always play together called Toiletty. From what I remember him telling me, the game involved his uncle trying to finger dollar coins out of the kid's naked ass and the kid doing the same to the uncle. This was only ever played in the kid's tree fort, and he was allowed to keep all the dollar coins when the game was over. Thank Christ no one was allowed to play except my friend and his uncle. I moved away a short time later and never saw the kid ever again. It wasn't until many years later that I remembered it and thought to myself, holy shit, that's super fucked up. When we were 5 to 6 years old, one of the teachers at my primary school had a favorite kid in my class. He wasn't our teacher, but if he was on playground duty he would come out to the playground when we were there, find her, crouch down on the ground, and tell her to sit on his knee. Then when she did he would stroke her hair and tell her what beautiful blonde hair she had. At the time the rest of us were kind of jealous of her because we thought it just meant she was important. She was kind of quiet, but from a fairly rich family I guess, and always had nice clothes and stationery, and this teacher would openly say she was his favorite and ask us where she was if he couldn't find her. I remember walking around a corner or something and seeing them by themselves with her on his knee as he talked to her softly. Years later I feel really quite disturbed by it. That poor kid. I found an unloaded, real revolver in the street behind our apartment when I was about 5 to 6. Put it with my other toy cowboy guns. That was a thing. Played with it. Didn't like it much. The real gun was heavy and too hard for me to pull the trigger. The plastic ones were much more fun. Eventually my mom found it and, in retrospective surprise, didn't freak out, just made it disappear. I have a good one. When I was around 5 or 6 I was at Kmart with my mom. This was back in the 70s, so as my mom shopped, I would hang out by myself in the toy department. I especially loved the Simone game, where you press the buttons and try to match the pattern. So one day I was standing there at the display playing Simone, and an old man started talking to me. He talked to me for a few minutes, and then he told me to come with him. He took me by the hand and started walking toward the back of the store where there were double doors that led out to the back parking lot. I remember wondering where we were going, but not being particularly concerned. As we were passing the last couple of aisles, I suddenly saw my mom at the end of the aisle. I kind of snapped out of it, realized that I should go to my mom rather than go with this guy. I pulled away from his hand and ran to my mom. I didn't say a word because I knew she had told me not to talk to strangers. Later on I realized that there were several unpleasant scenarios that I had been very lucky to escape. I've told this story before on Reddit, and I misspelled Simon then too. I clearly have an issue. I was 7. Had to pee really bad, but my mom was in the bathroom. After waiting and knocking and complaining, I just went in without waiting for a response. Found my mom sitting on the toilet and slumped over pale as hell. As calm as I can be I call my aunt over who freaks and calls ambulance. My mom was gone for over a couple of months. Family just told me she was traveling whenever I asked about her. Years later I learned I screwed up my mom's suicide attempt and she had been in a psych ward for months. When I was around 9 I went snow sledding with family and friends. It was a popular sledding area with a few different hills and some woods. This older guy in his 40s had an awesome toboggan with a flashlight rigged up on the front. He was flying down hills 10x faster than anyone. He was there by himself, and it was getting dark out. He came up to me and started telling me about this secret hill in the woods that was huge. He told me I could use his sled. I followed him for about 2 minutes until I realized I couldn't see my family or friends anymore. I was maybe 20 feet into the woods before I was overcome with a horrible gut-wrenching feeling. I dropped my sled and ran like hell back toward my family. I remember hearing his footsteps behind me moving as quickly as I was. By the time I got to my family and told them, he had disappeared. I'm 100% certain I would have been molested and or murdered in those woods. Telling this story makes me feel the way I did when I was 20 feet into those woods, 21 years ago. Scary as fuck. When I was about 6 or 7, my cousins and I had a lemonade stand in front of my house. This younger couple drove up and asked me specifically if I wanted to go to Jungle Bungle. It was like Chuck E. Cheese's, but way more fun. My cousins didn't even let me answer and quickly ran inside with me in tow. They told my parents and we weren't allowed outside the rest of the day due to the couple still circling the area. I don't remember if my parents called the cops or not. I didn't realize how close I got to getting kidnapped, since my dumbass probably would have went, had it not been for my wonderful cousins. I was at a store with my mom when I was about 8, and I was wandering around in my own and these two guys kept staring me down and following me. Every corner I turned it seemed like one of them was there. I followed my gut and ran to my mom. She thought I was being dramatic, but it was fine after that. 3 or 4 hours later my dad, a police dispatcher, called and said there were 2 guys caught trying to kidnap a little girl at that same store just a little bit after we left. My mom didn't tell me that part until about 18 years later. Thank God I followed my gut even as a kid. When I was about 5, my family went to a new park to play baseball. It was in an area we hadn't been to. We lived in Denver, but didn't typically stray too far, and I wasn't thrilled. Fuck baseball. Anyhow, after much pleading I got permission from my mom to go play up on the hill about 100 yards away. There was a huge swing set that was still within view of the field. They're engrossed in their game, arguing over who has to sit in the outfield, yada yada, and I'm just chilling on my swing, minding my own business, playing never-ending story, when a couple of girls that were young enough to not be scary, but old enough to be super cool, 12 maybe, showed up, start screwing around on the slide, then ask me what I'm doing. They ask about my life, talk nerdy 80s and early 90s movies with me, and ask what I like to do. I say dancing. And they say oh us too. Yeah, Mark loves watching us dance. In my naivete I say my dad loves coming to my dance recitals too. They giggle and tell me no, Mark is kind of like their substitute dad, since neither of them have dads. He's a man that takes care of them because they don't have moms or dads, and he wants to take care of them. They explain they aren't related, just friends that didn't have a home, so they live in the same home together. But Mark is great because he takes them to travel and meet other girls their age. Well, I like to travel, I say. Really? Come meet Mark, they say. We think you'd really like him. He's nice to us. He would love to have a friend that's younger to spoil. He gives them lots of presents, they say, especially when they have fun with his friends. I want to. Mark sounds like a cool dude. They're really nice girls, non-threatening. Never talk to strange adults, right? But these girls aren't adults and they vouch for Mark. However, that morning, the discovery of Ailey Berelez's body had been in the local paper. My mom, typically a free-range parent, had been loath to let me stray from her side that morning. So reluctantly, I tell them, nope, I'm going to go see what my family is doing, and I run down the hill before they can protest. I didn't have any reservations about hanging out with them. I just knew if I disappeared my mom would be pissed. I told my mom. She blew it off as a funny story, and I mostly forgot about it. It wasn't until this past year, when I did training on investigations into human trafficking, that I remembered those girls. I hope they were either 100% full of shit, or turned out alright. When I was around 6, my family rented a smaller house on a farm. The farm was way out of the way, and had a long road that led to the main street. The owner of the land had a very smart and large German shepherd named Lady. I would hang out with her a lot. One day Lady took off running all the way down the road and I ran after her. So as I was convincing to have her follow me back, a blue truck pulled up, and a woman hopped out. She went on about Lady, and how she used to own her when she was a younger, before putting her up for adoption. I don't remember much else of what she said. I responded here and there, but I do remember her offering to give me a ride up back to the house. The entire time lady stayed right in front of me, staring the woman down and not moving. The lady took a step forward, lady just growled at her and stayed her ground. Eventually the woman gave up trying to coerce me and left. That night, I mentioned it to my brother, saying that I had met lady's previous owner. Because at 6, I had no fucking idea. He said, you know she was probably trying to kidnap you, right? Mrs. Anderson has had lady since a young puppy. It didn't really hit me until I thought about it a few years ago. When a dog knows someone, especially a previous kind owner, they're usually pretty fucking excited and greet them. But for her to protect me the way she did, it didn't even cross my mind. Scary to think back on it. When I was in 7th grade or so, I had a best friend Sammy. She lived with her dad and brother. Her parents were divorced, and the father was raising the 2 kids. Her father was pretty funny and liked to joke around. One particular day, Sammy and I were in her room. She had one of those folding room dividers between the door of her room and her bed. Her father came in and demanded that she change her underwear. Right at that time, when I was also there, and while she was changing her underwear, he was popping up and peeking over the divider. I thought it was funny at the time, and that he was joking around. Now, I'm not so sure. Growing up I was a quiet and shy kid, but I've had vague memories of me at a young age screaming at the top of my lungs, and being forced to take some sort of medications. I also had reoccurring, intense nightmares about being kidnapped. It wasn't until last year, I'm 27, that my mom revealed a piece of my past that made everything click into place. When I was 4, a man lured me away during recess at my daycare, and I was missing for about 6 hours. Nobody knows what exactly happened during that time, except that he eventually dropped me off down the street from the daycare and sped off. After that, I started having severe episodes/fits that required sedatives to calm me down. They stopped with time because I think I repressed the incident. I still don't know what happened while I was missing, but the nightmares now make sense. I think I was like 4 or 5 and my mom's side of the family was having a camping trip in Colorado. I ran off, but I did, and I found this other campsite and there was a van with a bunch of kids playing in it. Some guy told me I could go in there and play with them, and I did, and he shut the door. I was oblivious to the whole thing, and I was just playing with the other kids. Meanwhile my family is freaking out and looking for me, and they finally found me and tried to get me out of the van, but the door was locked. They told the guy to get me out, but he was being weirdly persistent about it and saying that I was just playing and he'd bring me back later. My grandpa basically said if he didn't open the door he was going to actually kill him. So I got out of the van and we left, and I was sad that I couldn't keep playing. I'd had a couple dreams about the incident when I was older and I always thought they were just dreams until the story got brought up at a family reunion a few years ago. It shook me to the core when I realized just how close I was to being taken away from my family forever. When I was in 6th grade, in 1984, my social studies teacher would reward students with trips to the movies with him, or going out to eat, or coming to his apartment to hang out. The cutest boys in class would win all the time, and it would always be weird reasons like doing his best, or being extra helpful. I was jealous, because girls never got to win. Years later I realized it was really sketchy. I even tried to find him, because it was possible he was still giving good boys special treatment, but he had died from lung cancer years before. I was 10 and my brother was 9. My next door neighbors were the same age as us. We were swimming in a state park. We went into the bathroom and found a gay porn magazine in a stall. Nothing graphic, just naked gay dudes. We were going through the pages and laughing our asses off. When we walked out of the stall there was a naked man standing there looking at us. All 4 of us started laughing hysterically and ran out of there. About 25 years later I remembered it. I realized that naked man planted that magazine and was waiting for us. Still gives me the creeps. My prof, my sister and I were going door to door in the neighborhood to see which kids were available to play one summer. One of the boys down the street has his friend over and they want to play something about a fort they built in the wooded area at the far end of our subdivision. So we walk away from the houses and into the woods for a while, the boys ahead of us not really talking to us as we follow. My sister grabs my hand and shouts to the boys we have to go home now and immediately turns around, taking me with her. We got a little lost, but nothing too serious. I remember Mud and my sister crying, but I figured it was because her pants were dirty. We eventually get back to houses and walk home. My sister cried to my mom for a bit, and for some reason we got 2 snacks, pretzels and goldfish. Each and mom sat with us at the table while we ate them. Ultimately, a pretty decent day. Looking back, I was 4/5, my sister was 6/7, and the neighbor kid was 15 at the time. My sister realized something wasn't right and noped us out of whatever the fuck was going to happen to us in the woods, and my mother 100% recognized that. I've talked about it with my sister a few times as adults and we agreed that was some serious fuckery that we avoided that day. I can't imagine what must have been going through my mom's head, and now that I'm now near the age she was at the time, I really want to talk to her about it.